Welcome to Healing the Spirit, a space where we awaken our creativity, deepen our connections, and remember who we are through the lens of astrology, archetypes, and art making. I'm your host, Jonathan Coe. Hello everyone, welcome to Healing the Spirit. I'm going to be sharing about November, about the energy that I'm picking up, the astrology, and I also pulled some tarot cards for us. So let's get right into it. Overall, November feels very different from October to me. There's almost a jubilance to it. I almost feel like this party vibe coming from November. There's a sense of shedding and clearing, and it's not kind of the gnarly, challenging, pulling teeth kind of shedding and clearing either. Some of it may bring up bittersweet energy and maybe even nostalgia, but ultimately, November comes with a sense of relief. There's a pressure that's been present throughout October that feels to me is ready to lift up and to change colors. At the same time, there's also a sense of being a little bit unsure or self-conscious about the shift. November to me is not really about arriving fully in a new reality. Rather, November is more like this period of intermission between two acts that are pretty intense. We are still in a process of bridging the old and the new, and some of the themes that we have been seeing and maybe even struggling with a little bit in October is going to make a comeback. And yet there's a different access to resourcing on a collective, on a cosmic level in November that wasn't available to us in October. If October felt a little bit like being underwater, if October felt a little claustrophobic, maybe even, November feels to me like we get to take occasional walk in the park in the middle of the day. Maybe we get to take some interesting classes or read some interesting books, attend some cool gatherings that make the transition not so challenging. That reminds us why the practice of building, of cultivating a relationship to hope and hopefulness is crucial and is necessary to our aliveness. So November is a great month to reestablish our baseline, to reshuffle some energetic patterns of bracing, of anticipating the worst that maybe have unconsciously gotten a little bit locked up in the body. There's a sense in November that even if the results ultimately are not exactly aligning with our expectations, or maybe even aligning with our need on a deeper level, that maybe there's still work to do here. We're also given the opportunity to take a breath, to refocus our attention on what actually matters to us. It's a potent time for recalibration, and along with that recalibration, there may be a sense of uncertainty, but the uncertainty here feels less foreboding to me and more like cautious optimism. I also pick up on themes around becoming unknown to the current self, around allowing ourselves to take on new ventures, to explore parts of ourselves or our relationships that are previously unseen to us, or maybe never have been allowed to come out and to play. Or maybe we simply have never really given ourselves permission to see ourselves through the lens of that part. There may be new opportunities on the horizon. There may be new opportunities for adventures that also still feel quite rooted in who we know ourselves to be. So some questions to contemplate here are, where am I committed to fundamentally misunderstanding the nature of suffering? Where do I believe that sufferings need to last forever and ever and ever, right? In what areas of my life am I finally ready to begin embracing the possibility that different outcomes might be possible for me? How do I create the space to honor and to cultivate the emergence of new realities? I'm thinking specifically about how new realities are like seeds, right? They require our participation in fostering them, in watering them, in nourishing them. And so we can become active collaborators for new realities to happen. We may not be in full control of these realities kind of popping up and out of the ground, but we can catch the seeds of these new realities and begin to do something about it. This is a month that supports the process of illuminating areas where we operate from the assumption that our process will always feel really, really hard, or that our aspirations are completely out of reach, and we're given the opportunity to rewrite some of these stories. Now, the results may not be immediate, the results may not show up right away, but the act of taking a chance on hope may shift us out of our assumptions about who we are. It may help us start to open up to who we may be if we participate in a new reality that we take part in imagining. We're also invited to return to a sense of core self during this month. We may be deep in the process of retrieving parts of self that have laid dormant for a while, or parts of self that feel abandoned or left behind at some point because maybe there were other priorities, specifically priorities that are related to surviving, priorities that are related to tending to the very real needs that may not be super nourishing to our spirits, but are necessary nonetheless. There's an invitation to return to our spiritual and to our emotional tools, more specifically in service to reawakening the wisdom that we can access through these tools. That the tools themselves may not be the source of the wisdom, but the tools help us access a certain state that allows the wisdom to flow through. There's a renewing and a deepening of our relationships with these tools that are available. We're being shown that some of the spiritual technologies that we've been learning, that we've relied upon in the past few years, especially the ones that have been kind of taking a back seat maybe throughout 2024, are ready to take us to the next level, to a deeper layer of engagement with life. There's a sense of a bit of a deja vu here, right? There's a sense of revisiting some things that we learned that we kind of forgot about, and then now we're ready to pick back up, and we're seeing it from a completely new lens. This is a great month to be doing a little bit of review. You may want to consider, who have I been in the past few years? What are some of the things that really mattered to me between, say, 2020 to 2024? Can I give myself the gift of looking back and rekindling a sense of friendship, a sense of deeply embracing the wisdom of my past self, and then to reintegrate some of those back into my current present time experiences? This may be a great time to read old journal entries, to celebrate how far you've come, to honor your progress, to embrace and acknowledge and validate some of the challenges that you've been moving through. And if this feels cringy to you, remember that the more you can see and celebrate your own progress, your own movements, your own accomplishments, the more you'll have access to see the same in other people too, and in the collective. November is ultimately about appreciation to me. There's a lot here about remembering that if we were to build a new future, it not only requires efforts on a mundane level, it not only requires us to put in the hard work, so to speak, but it also requires us to approach and to build a new culture, to build a new lens, to practice a new way of being with one another. I also invite you to feel into what are some of the practices, what are some of the relationships and the situations that bring me back into a sense of my core self. What makes me feel spiritually resourced? How do I know that I am spiritually resourced? And then to really give yourself the gift of actually engaging in these practices as part of your resourcing. So let's discuss the astrology. We start the month by with a new moon in Scorpio on November 1st. This new moon in Scorpio is ruled by a tender, sensitive, I would even say grouchy Mars in the anaretic degree of Cancer. So this is Mars in 29 degrees Cancer. And at the same time, this new moon is supported by a trine from Saturn in Pisces. And we also have Mercury in Scorpio trining Neptune in Pisces. There is a grand water trine between Mercury, Neptune, and Cancer. So immediately when we think about a grand water trine, right? This is a time when feelings run extremely high. This is a time of potentially great overwhelm. When I think about a grand water trine, I literally think about a flood, right? Like it can feel like our emotions, our anxieties, our worries, whatever state we are holding on to that have been building up in our emotional body is kind of reaching a crescendo. This is a great transit if you are an artist or a singer-songwriter maybe who relies on feeling your big feelings and potentially expressing that creatively. This is a great time to be engaging in some grief ritual, in going to an expansive body of water and letting yourself really feel the vastness of it all, right? This is not a great time for answers. This is not a great time for answers, right? This is a great time for feeling the feelings. And to add to that, this is also a new moon, right? So there are themes here around starting a new cycle. There are themes here around the moon not being visible in the night sky, right? And to me, maybe on an emotional level, this new moon may point us to looking at what we're not willing to do anymore. And it has to begin with feelings, right? It has to begin with asking yourself, what feels bad in my daily reality? What can I do to say no to the things that make me feel bad? What feels ambiguous and doesn't feel like it brings joy or nourishment or growth, but maybe feels like a lot of busy work? And what do you need to resource yourself to feel emboldened to let some of that go? This is a great time for praying, for taking small but potentially significant steps towards accumulating the resources that can help you ultimately let go of what currently feels like a prison or like a restriction to your spirit, what feels like stale water to your emotional body. So the level of itchiness during this new moon can be quite high. Like I said, we have a grouchy Mars in Cancer ruling the sun and the moon. And so there's an invitation here to lean upon, to call forth our internal wisdom, especially with that Mercury trine Neptune, right? There's potential for things to get a little bit confusing if we move too fast. So it may be helpful to collect the data, to feel the feelings, to give yourself space and time to really validate your own experience, and then to wait for clarity. The next steps will present themselves to you. And sometimes the next steps don't come, in which case, consider that perhaps you're called to do exactly that, nothing, right? By the end of the month, we will be looking at a pretty different sky. So if we fast forward to November 30th, we will be gearing up for a new moon in Sagittarius with Mars already in Leo, right before Mars goes retrograde, and Venus is going to be in Capricorn. So this new moon in Sagittarius is technically not going to happen until December 1st, so we're not going to talk about that new moon in Sagittarius. But let's talk about the placement of the planets at the end of the month to give you a bit of a comparison here, right? To deepen into your more subtle sense and nuance of the movements of the planets. So let's look at Mercury. By the end of the month, Mercury has left Scorpio and entered Sagittarius, which is a place where Mercury is challenged. But in my own experience with Mercury, Mercury likes being challenged to a certain extent. And this move from Scorpio to Mercury actually happened very early in the month, on the 2nd of November. And by the 25th of November, Mercury will be stationing retrograde in 22-degree Sagittarius. So Mercury in Sagittarius prefers the bigger picture, the contextual, the philosophical, rather than being stuck in details or facts. At the same time, this placement compared to Mercury in Scorpio, which we had previously, may invite kind of the big questions about what we believe in, who our allies are, and what are some of the larger missions that we're hoping to accomplish in whatever it is that we do, right? The next planet that we'll take a look at is Mars. So Mars, by the end of the month, has left Cancer and entered Leo, which also happens pretty early in the month, on the 3rd. This, to me, is arguably the shift that will feel the most dramatic out of all the other planetary shifts between October and November. Mars, which was previously in Cancer, is under-resourced, right? Mars has a hard time dealing with the ever-changing feelings landscape of Cancer. And by the time it enters Leo on the 3rd, despite the fact that Mars is in its shadow period, gearing up for a retrograde on December 6th, it is a much more resource place for Mars. While the Sun is in Scorpio until November 21st, Mars will be in a mutual reception with the Sun, meaning that Mars is in the Sun's home and the Sun is in Mars's home. They will have access to each other's homes, and therefore there's a sense of being able to rely on one another. A mutual reception between Mars and the Sun makes aligning our will and our energy with our sense of purpose much, much easier. Mars is the protector, Mars is the guardian, Mars is the soldier, and the Sun is the king, right? And the two naturally have this forward movement quality. There's kind of a momentum to a collaboration between the Sun and Mars. They also have this hot drying quality, right? It's a great time to hone our leadership by taking on a project or an idea that maybe we've wanted to develop for a while, but where maybe things haven't felt fully aligned. By the time the Sun enters Sagittarius on November 21st, that will be a great time to take a step back from a lot of the exertion part of this process, right? A lot of the doing, in order for us to be able to take a look at all the progress you've made and to look at the big picture and to strategize around where we might want to take this next. Now, of course, by the time we enter December, which is again problem for another day, we'll have a Mars retrograde, right, which will again bring this kind of grouchiness or a lack of ability for Mars to move forward, and especially when that Mars retrograde re-enters the land of Cancer, I tend to believe that that will be probably some of the most challenging times for us on a personal level, right? What I like to say about Mars and Venus is that they are both very corporeal planets. They're planets that are not just their influences are not just happening on the abstract. Mars and Venus are very much felt in the body. Mars and Venus speaks to vitality, to connection, right? In other words, the impact of Mars that is not so well placed is not going to be subtle, right? And similarly with Venus. So I want to add here, going back to November and the beautiful Mars in Leo, Sun in Scorpio situation we have, I also want to add here that this can be a great time to replenish your access to your life force energy. So if you've been feeling really depleted, really demotivated, really lost, even especially in the past couple months, if you felt like kind of being lost at sea a little bit or just like really confused about the direction you're supposed to go, this period throughout all of November really is a great time to get the help you need, to resource yourself, and to replenish your vitality. Right? For some, this may be getting back into an exercise routine. For others, it may be finding a practitioner that can help you address some of the underlying issues that contribute to a sense of lack of vitality, right? You may want to see an acupuncturist, or you may want to see an energy worker. You may want to work with a doctor, right, that specializes in helping you re-access a certain sense of physical body vitality. It may also look like reestablishing connections with spiritual practices, right? It may be spending less time working and more time enjoying the company of really interesting people, doing interesting things together with these people, right? In other words, I don't think that this is all about working. So just to kind of put that on the table, right? This may be a time to kind of retreat and to replenish that sense of vitality, that sense of confidence, that sense of being really rooted in who you are and where you're going. Next, let's look at Venus. So by the end of the month, Venus will have left Sagittarius and will be in Capricorn by the end of the month. This is an ingress that also happened pretty early in the month on November 11th. I'm a huge fan of this transit, especially in the context of the Mars and Sun mutual reception, because it feels to me like what's initiated during this period can have a lasting impact. Venus in Capricorn is a fantastic guide for durability, for strategy, for the love of prioritization. This is not the kind of prioritization that makes you feel like crunchy or makes you feel like straitjacketed, right? This is prioritization that is about aligning your energy and what you are directing your energy towards and your values, right? The things that really matter to you. It's a great placement, again, for doing things that actually matter and putting in the time while also pouring in the love and the devotion that's often necessary to become really skilled at something. The phrase that came up for me when considering Venus in Capricorn is commitment is sexy, right? There's something really exciting about someone who is devoted to something, and you can tell in the way that they are committed to the thing. There's something so exciting, something so inspiring about that. That there's something that moves us to also want to take something up that we're committed to, right? Admittedly, there is a cooling off as Venus goes from the fire sign of Sagittarius into Capricorn. But to me, it feels like that cooling off is really conducive to applying oneself and applying one's efforts to engage in something that requires time, that requires energy, and that requires meticulousness. Finally, we should also mention the ingress of Pluto into Aquarius. This warrants a more extensive treatment, which I won't get into here, but Pluto will be leaving Capricorn forever on November 19th. Actually, let me take that back. It's not forever, just in our lifetime, right? The next time Pluto in Capricorn, I will not be alive to talk about the astrology, and you probably will not be alive to listen to it. So that's what I mean by forever. This is massive. The first half or so of November until November 19th, right, when Pluto enters Aquarius, may bring a kind of reprise of the highlights of everything we've been learning while Pluto is in Capricorn. And for that reason, there may be a baseline level of intensity there. Pluto relates to that which is hidden from plain sight. Pluto relates to the underworld. And in Capricorn, it speaks to themes of power, of domination, of control, and structure, right? So some of the things that we've been dealing with since Pluto entered Capricorn may kind of intensify here, right? Either on a mundane level, in terms of the events that happen, or maybe just internally within us. So, the last thing that I want to mention about the astrology is the full moon in Taurus, which is on November 19th. This is a spicy full moon. The moon will be very closely conjoined Uranus. Uranus is the planet of surprises, is the planet of revolution, is the planet of breaking away from that which has shackled us, and it may bring unexpected plot twists, right? And it's not necessarily a bad thing. Uranus to me is more of a chaotic neutral agent rather than a malevolent force, right? Uranus is just erratic. It's just unpredictable. So the moon in Taurus ruled by Venus in Capricorn, and the sun in Scorpio ruled by Mars in Leo, right? As we talked about before, with this sun and Mars mutual reception, and then supported by this kind of Venus in Capricorn energy, there's a lot of creative energy here. There's a lot of opportunities for seeing different perspectives, for recognizing new capacities within us. There's kind of an awakening energy to this specific full moon, side by side with tension and perhaps even some level of discomfort. Okay, so let's move on and briefly talk about the three cards that I pulled from the tarot to guide our journey this month. The three cards I pulled are Nine of Cups, which in the Tabula Mundi tarot comes with the keyword happiness, and then Eight of Cups, which is indolence, and the Ace of Swords. To me, these cards serve as reminders that clarity, which is represented by Ace of Swords, is achieved through joyfully leaving what is no longer in affinity with us and through stepping away from old patterns that bind us. This is an invitation to tap into joy as an essential ingredient in leaving something behind. When this message came through, it was a little surprising to me because there's a part of me that's like, when I think about leaving stuff behind, I don't think about joy. I think about sadness. I think about longing. I think about wistfulness. I think about resistance, right? I don't really think about leaving things behind as being joyful. So I was really sitting there feeling into what process of leaving behind feels joyful, right? What facilitates joy as a natural response to leaving something behind? And it's making me think about graduation, actually. If you think about the idea of finishing something that you know has an endpoint, right? And giving yourself permission to really celebrate that process of leaving something, then it naturally becomes joyful, right? Sure, maybe there's also wistfulness or nostalgia or maybe a little bit of uncertainty, but there's also a sense of recognizing that we've just accomplished something really meaningful, right? So perhaps there's a relationship or a project or a pattern that you are just done with, right? Um, Maybe there's a philosophy or a way of being that you're like, I don't want to do this anymore. I'm over it, right? You have a few options here. You can just toss it away, or you can fight it off, right? You can see it as this ultimate evil that you need to push away from your system, or you can simply continue to remind yourself that you're done with this particular curriculum, right? You're ready to graduate from this specific classroom, from this course, from this period, from this chapter, right? I always get that super satisfying feeling when I'm done reading a book. So you may also want to consider that, okay, this is the end of that book for me, right? This is the end of that chapter. I can move on. I can make space for another learning opportunity that will inevitably bring its own challenges and its own joys. And there's kind of a relief in that, right? Ace of Swords can promise clarity, and it also speaks to charting new beginnings, to cultivating new ideas, which inherently have a certain degree of instability to it. So, this may be something that we are leaving the month with. We may be blessed with a new idea, and we may not have full clarity about how to execute them, and that's cool, right? We may also, given the Mars and Sun mutual reception supported by Venus and Capricorn, this month may really bring up a sense of, oh, I finally get to accomplish something. But afterwards, maybe I'll need to take a look or take a step back and look at it from a distance and give myself permission to evaluate what it is that I've done and to continue the process of creating with maybe a little less intensity. Okay, so that's everything I want to share about the month of November. I am excited for this month. And I'm very grateful that you are tuning in. I hope this has been helpful and useful for you. It's literally one of the most joyful things for me to make. Actually, I really love talking about transits and pulling cards and looking ahead. Blame it on my day chart. What can I say? So I hope this is useful for you. If you have enjoyed this, or if you are finding it helpful in kind of resetting you and realigning you at the beginning of the month, I invite you to continue to come back to it as you feel drawn to. And also, I would love it if you could help me get this podcast out there. You can either share this episode with people in your life that you feel may benefit and may enjoy this. You can write me a review on Apple Podcasts or a comment on Spotify, leave some ratings. All of this is so helpful in getting this work out there so that more people who can potentially benefit from it and who can resonate with this can find this podcast too. All right, thank you so much. I am wishing you a beautiful November, and I will see you next month. Take care.